Today on Investigate TV, the oil and gas industry makes billions of dollars every year, but well cleanup costs often fall to taxpayers.
It's cheaper for companies to literally walk away from their wells and their obligations and then leave the mess for taxpayers and communities to deal with.
And in many cases, the people who now own the land the wells are located on never wanted or profited off them.
Oh, I don't want to be in the oil business. I have no desire to be in the oil business.
While one of the top oil-producing states faces a more costly cleanup.
If you think about how quickly vegetation regrows in Alaska, and you think about 100 years of growth, it's quite an endeavor to access and get the proper equipment into these locations.
Investigate TV starts right now. Hello and welcome to Investigate TV. I'm Lee Zurin. The oil and gas industry is one of the most profitable industries in the world, and critics say it's behind a crisis costing taxpayers billions of dollars and threatening the environment. That crisis is with Orphan Wells. Those are wells that oil and gas companies fail to plug, leading to pollution and costly cleanup. Reporter Kristen Crowley worked with our partners at ProPublica and Capital in Maine to look into this issue and what can be done to fix it.
For more than a century, this farm just 50 miles south of Oklahoma City has been home to the Ledgerwood family.
This may very well be the prettiest place I've been.
Stan Ledgerwood says the sprawling plains are more than just a place to live.
It's just been part of us, I would say.
He and his wife, Tina, built their home a few years ago, the home they plan to spend the rest of their lives in.
When you decided to retire here, what did you envision for your future?
Peace. It's a little bit of tranquility and no stress.
And what have you gotten?
Well, we certainly have not had peace, and we've had a lot of stress.
Stress, they say, that stems from this: an oil company's injection well on the Ledgerwood's land. These wells are pretty common in oil states like Oklahoma, so it's not unusual to see. But what you shouldn't see is this. 7 years ago, Stan captured this video of salty wastewater bubbling from the well. Then the following year came news Stan and Tina were dreading. The well contaminated their land. Lab testing shows high levels of chloride in the soil, about 12 times higher than the acceptable amount. But the contamination didn't stop in the ground.
We get a call in March 2018, saying don't drink the water. And then we don't have water to drink for a little over a year.
Stan says they bought clean water to drink, but had to use the contaminated water for everything else.
We had to use it for household needs, but it was caustic, I guess you would call it, enough that it would rust stainless steel, and toddlers' hands would get very chapped.
We don't know what we bathed in for years, so it's just really sad and frustrating.
Frustrating not only because their property was contaminated, but also because the cleanup of their property was never finished. That's in part because this well doesn't have an owner anymore. The company, South Creek Petroleum, filed for bankruptcy in 2021. Company representatives did not respond to requests for comment. Without an owner, it's now known as an orphan well, one of likely millions across the country.
Why are orphaned wells a problem?
They are a problem because they contaminate groundwater resources, and orphan wells also contaminate the air, and they leak methane into the atmosphere.
ProPublica and Capital in Maine reporters found multiple sites in New Mexico emitting huge quantities of methane. The leaks can turn catastrophic and deadly. In 2021, a 14-year-old girl from Louisiana died when a supposedly abandoned oil tank exploded. Shannon Anderson is the organizing director and an attorney with the Powder River Basin Resource Council in Wyoming, and she's been tackling the issue of orphan wells for decades. She says companies are supposed to set aside money to plug and clean up wells. Those allotments are called bonds, and it's the law. There's just one problem.
There's just not enough money set aside. And so it's cheaper for companies to literally walk away from their wells and their obligations, leave that money on the table, and then leave the mess for taxpayers and communities to deal with.
Yes, taxpayers end up footing the bill, and the bill can be huge. Oklahoma regulators say it's around $28,000 to clean up one well, but federal regulators estimate it to be more than twice that. And a really big cleanup, that could break 7 figures. When companies don't plug the wells or plug them improperly, states have to step in and do the work for them. Our partners at ProPublica and Capital in Maine did an analysis of the 15 states that produce nearly all the country's oil and gas. In Texas, the estimated cost to the state to clean up all the currently unplugged wells, should they become orphaned, is $37.9 billion. The money set aside? Only $565 million. That's less than 2%. California's cost could be about $19 billion, with $240 million set aside, also less than 2%. Kansas has less than $2 million in bonds for a potential cleanup cost of $967 million, a fraction of 1%. Their analysis found all of these states face a shortfall of at least hundreds of millions of dollars. That means taxpayers all over the country have to fill in the gaps.
We have a huge liability in our state that we're trying to get better control of.
Oklahoma House Representative Brad Bull says he's trying to change that in his state with new legislation. Currently in Oklahoma, companies only need to guarantee $25,000, whether they have one well or 1,000. Bull says he wants to move to a tiered system that would look like this. The more you own, the more you pay. Companies owning 101 or more wells would set aside $150,000 in bonds.
Is $150,000 sufficient enough to cover any potential costs?
Well, it's not. As you know, if just doing the math, if it's $20,000 average per well to plug, and you have 100 wells, that's what, $2 million. And so a $150,000 bond isn't going to cover the $2 million. But it's a lot better than a $25,000 bond.
Or at least it would have been. 2 months after our interview, Bull's bill died in the Senate. Anderson says the change we need to see in these oil-producing states can't happen without lawmakers.
It's a huge loophole that's being exploited lawfully by companies across the country.
The American Petroleum Institute is the industry's major trade group. It declined an on-camera interview, but provided a statement saying in part that it supports policies for bonds that protect taxpayers, adding, "We are continuing to work with policymakers to advance balanced regulations that enhance safety, sustainability, and environmental stewardship." But Anderson says that remains to be seen.
This is the most profitable industry in the world. It has tremendous political power, and it has successfully used that political power to keep this problem a problem. And we need, folks around the country to start really caring about this issue and supporting regulators that are holding the industry accountable.
Accountability is exactly what the Ledgerwoods are waiting for.
I never dreamed that 7 years later we would still be struggling with this.
The land that's been in their family for more than a century, they've had to sell most of it, 200 out of 230 acres, to fund a legal battle trying to get their farm cleaned up. A fight Stan says has already cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and one they fear they are unlikely to win.
A victim of crime, at least the state stands up for them. And here you're just on your own.
No one's standing up for you.
No. Nah.
South Creek denied all allegations in the lawsuit and blames the equipment company. That company also denied accusations. The federal government is trying to do something about this problem. As part of the bipartisan infrastructure law, it set aside $4.7 billion for states, tribes, and federal agencies to plug orphan wells. But the problem, Shannon Anderson says, is that is still taxpayer money.
Coming up, when you think of Kansas, most think sunflowers and wheat fields. The state also has an oil legacy, which some want to end. A family's fight to break free from this liquid gold legacy after the break. Welcome back to Investigate TV. Kansas is the 9th largest oil-producing state with 27 million barrels of oil produced last year. The industry supports jobs, provides income, and generates millions in state and local tax revenue. But the state has identified nearly 5,300 abandoned oil wells that need to be capped at a cost of $6,000 to $14,000 apiece. Angie Racono spoke with a family of farmers about the struggles with capping dozens of poorly documented wells littered across their property.
Every piece of land has history. This is the Durr Farm in Miami County. 240 acres bought by Ken Durr back in 1970.
$35,000 for 240 acres. It was a lot of money back then.
The farm passed to sons, including Wayne, and now grandsons.
I've been out here since I was 4 years old, so it's the only place I've ever known.
There's cattle and horses, and the legacy of oil. Old paperwork reveals the history.
In the Wea Indian tribes, back in 1854.
The United States government purchased this land from Native Americans. Drilling came later.
He would have sold the mineral rights back in somewhere between 26 and 30, and then it's been downhill ever since.
It's this way on many farms. Sometimes selling the mineral rights below was a way to save the family farm.
I mean, we could walk around all day out here and I could show them to you. But
there are about 40 abandoned wells on the Durr Farm. Carl refers to them as minefields. Watch where you step. They can also leak. So this is what Ken Durr inherited when he bought this farm and what his grandson deals with decades later.
I would like to see them all abandoned and abandoned properly so that, they're not a hazard.
The first oil well in Kansas was drilled in 1860, so it predates the Civil War. Investors came to Kansas hoping for fortunes, but some projects went belly up. Abandoned wells are everywhere. You see the signs as you drive down roads or stop in fields.
The guy that we leased it to went bankrupt.
We met Robert and Clara Ann Kepnich when we noticed an oil pump leaking on their farmland where they grow crops.
This here ain't the only oil spill around, The other guys, they got oil spills on their place too and that. And
they've sued along with their neighbors, arguing a modern-day abandonment. The issue is still before the courts, so they wait.
Really frustrating.
Here's how the oil industry works in Kansas. Someone owns the land, but someone else can own the mineral rights deep below the surface. Companies and investors come together with equipment. They own the lease. Landowners get a cut for their troubles, even more if they still own the mineral rights. But they can also get left with a mess when projects fail.
Oh, I don't want to be in the oil business. I have no desire to be in the oil business.
This farm never struck it rich. A crude situation for the Durrs, who are left with abandoned wells.
There is no such thing as the oil business out here.
One abandoned well was recently sealed with cement, a project funded under that federal grant. But dozens remain on this one farm. Kansas has identified 5,000 more abandoned wells across the state that need to be capped right now. The list keeps growing as hesitant landowners step forward.
There are times where maybe people are afraid to report abandoned wells because they don't want to be responsible for them.
The Durrs simply want out. About a decade ago, they bought the mineral rights.
Oh yeah, we are going to be done.
The Durs recently achieved that last monumental step. They acquired the lease. It's tough for many families to do that. It is the final step to reclaiming all their family farm. Not just the land, but what's beneath. A family finally ending the legacy of oil in Kansas.
Up next, dozens of abandoned leaking wells are hidden across the vast landscape of Alaska. The costly cleanup efforts after the break. Welcome back to Investigate TV. While crude oil is produced in 32 states, according to the latest data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, just 5 states accounted for nearly 3/4 of the country's total oil production in 2022. Included in that 5 is our northernmost state, Alaska. Rebecca Palsha takes a look at the staggering costs unique to plugging orphan wells in the largest state.
Okay, we are at the location of well 17. Pretty interesting find here.
This is an orphan well. It's 104 years old, ancient, abandoned, cemented in the forest, put here by the Chilkat Oil Company.
Super interesting find.
It's about 20 miles southeast of the mouth of the Copper River.
You could string these rods across that kind of landscape, up and down terrain.
This was Alaska's first petroleum refinery. Oil was discovered here in 1902 and at one point produced more than 50,000 gallons of gasoline. It was partially destroyed by fire and abandoned.
An orphan well is a well in which the operator is unknown or insolvent.
Because of that, now the state's responsible to plug the well and ensure it's not leaking harmful chemicals. Methane leaking from many of these unplugged wells is a severe safety hazard and significant cause of climate change. Across the country, there are more than 2 million unplugged oil and gas wells that need to be cleaned up. While Alaska has a low number, the costs to safely plug the wells are huge.
The modern day wells that I'm used to working on as an engineer, when I was an engineer, they a lot of times would stick pieces of wood or coiled up ropes down these wells as part of their plugging. And we have very incomplete well records.
A typical orphan well in the lower 48 costs roughly $75,000 to $125,000 to decommission.
And there's another engine here.
But Alaska's wells can be in remote places, and the price is closer to $3.1 million for each.
You know, sometimes half of the cost of the plugging project could be mobilization and demobilization to the site. So when we talk about someplace like the Katala, it's helicopter flights, it could be brush and road creation, clearing to access equipment to the sites. And this all requires coordination with various agencies. But if you think about how quickly vegetation regrows in Alaska, and you think about 100 years of growth, it's quite an endeavor to access and get the proper equipment into these locations.
A few years ago, the state thought there were 12 wells, but later realized there's almost 50.
You got the original belt-driven.
Several have recently been found, like well 17 in remote Katala, east of Cordova.
They're not currently dangerous to people because no one's living there, but several of the wells are actively leaking oil and gas and water to the surface.
Because Alaska is so big, many of our orphan wells are in remote places. But sometimes there are ones you drive by almost every day. South of Houston, this is Orphan Well Rosetta 2. Drilled in the 1950s, the state reports its information about this well's history is incomplete, like so many others.
There are 8 wells in the south central region. I think 8 or 9. I think we might have added a well. And so those are the wells that are closest to people. Some of these wells are right off the Parks Highway. You might have driven by them and not even known. Some are on private property. And so we were prioritizing those wells because they're, number one, closest to humans, and number two, they're relatively close to the road systems.
The Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act provides Alaska with millions of dollars to the state to plug and clean abandoned wells. To find one, look for a dent in the land or pipes sticking out of the ground.
It's possible there are wells in the state that we don't know about.
Scan the QR code on your screen now to watch full Investigate TV videos on our YouTube channel. While you're there, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Investigate TV content. Coming up, a study finds 36% of Americans have more credit card debt than they do emergency savings. We share tips to prioritize paying off debt while building an emergency fund after the break. Welcome back to Investigate TV. Credit card debt is soaring, and a study finds it's even outpacing what most Americans have set aside for emergencies. Rachel DePapa talks to an expert about how you can prioritize debt while also saving for an emergency fund in this week's Watching Your Wallet.
36% of Americans have more credit card debt than they do emergency savings.
This is the second year in a row Bankrate has noticed this happening. It's also the highest number of people with credit card debt versus emergency savings we've seen dating all the way back to 2011. Greg McBride, Bankrate's chief financial analyst, says household expenses have gone up dramatically over the last year. And a lot of times it's been the credit card absorbing that cost.
I mean, prices in general are up 20% in the last 4 years. Things like food prices are up 25% in the last 4 years. So the budgetary strain is very real. And that's had a pronounced impact on both credit card debt and savings. Savings balances that were pretty plump coming out of the pandemic have been run down. Credit card balances that had been paid down during the pandemic have run back up.
McBride says tackling credit card debt or building an emergency savings account is oftentimes not an either-or situation.
You can and should pursue both of those at the same time. And here's how. Set up a direct deposit from your paycheck into a dedicated savings account. That automates the savings. Or even roll out of bed on payday morning. You've got the savings done. Then you can channel your take-home pay toward really attacking that credit card debt.
He says people often ask him, should I use the savings I have to pay off my credit card debt? And he says the answer to that is very individualized. He says if you are a good, disciplined saver and the reason you have debt is because of an emergency or a medical bill, he says the answer is yes, use your emergency savings.
Buddy says if building that savings was hard, you should probably try to hang on to that money and tackle the debt in other ways.
And that's it for us. Thanks for joining us here on Investigate TV. Hope to see you next week.